The people who are the furthest ahead often feel the most behind in life, and this actually has nothing to do with how successful you are. Because the more ambitious somebody is, the higher and higher the bar gets raised in their own mind. And over time, that creates this really strange effect where no matter how much progress you make or no matter how hard you work, it still feels like you're never really where you're supposed to be yet. And there are a few reasons this happens that most ambitious people never think about, so that's what I'm going to get into here. But before we get into the reasons why this happens, it's important to understand something about ambitious people in general. Because the way ambitious people measure their progress is very different from how most people do. Ambitious people, what they do is they measure their progress based on where they think they should be by now. And that's really the first core reason that so many ambitious people feel behind in life. So one of the things I wanted to talk about here was this idea of the moving goalpost, right? Ambitious people, once they achieve something, they move the goalpost, they set a bigger goal for themselves, right? So that's good because achieving your goal means you've made progress, and otherwise you don't really have much of an incentive to make progress unless you set a bigger goal, right? And that's great, it's good to keep growing. But what this also does is it resets your expectations of yourself and your own abilities. So let's say you wanted to create an extra income or build a business, something along these lines, or hit a certain point in your career. Let's say you wanted to make $100,000 a year, right? A little over $8,000 a month. You hit that goal. Now what happens is your expectations of yourself completely change. Now that you have done that, that becomes your new baseline. And if you fail to meet that number, you feel like something's wrong with you, but it no longer feels like success anymore making that $100,000 a year. It just kind of, averages out and starts to feel like your new normal, the new thing that you expect of yourself. And this is true of any achievement that you ever make. You could start a business and get it to $10,000 a month. Then you bump up your goal to 20 and then 50 and then 100. I've seen it a million times. I've experienced it myself. Success very, very quickly stops feeling like success. And a big part of ambition is kind of this, moving target nature of goal setting in general. So again, the moment you hit a milestone, your brain pretty much immediately sets a new one. And a really interesting kind of bonus thing on the side here is that oftentimes what happens when you reach a goal is there's this almost like void or sense of emptiness in ambitious people. And that's why they continue to, create a new, bigger goal for themselves, because it's kind of like, well, what am I supposed to do now, right? And pursuit is one of the most exciting and rewarding parts of life, working really hard towards something. But this first part is only really part of the story. The next thing that I want to touch on is comparison inflation. Ambitious people tend to compare upward as opposed to sideways, which is kind of unfair to oneself, but it's also often done out of admiration and drive, and it often has positive intentions, but it can have negative results. So here's what I mean. You might see on social media, and social media is, can be pretty bad for making you feel behind these days. But let's say that you're 30 years old and you see somebody else on social media who's also 30 years old, and they have a business, they're married, they have kids, they have cars, they bought a house. Just to give you an example, you as a 30-year-old may look over and compare yourself to that person on the 30-year-old metric, but what you're not looking at is the 30-year-old part. What you're looking at is everything that they have and have accomplished that you haven't, or that you don't have. And what I mean here is, for one, social media exaggerates success. So, a lot of people have heard the idea that social media is kind of like just a highlight reel of everybody else's, golden moments and everything, which I think there's a lot of truth to. But what you're comparing yourself to, you think you're comparing yourself to the fact that you're 30 and they're 30, but the reality is you're comparing what you have at 30 to what they have at 30, right? And what may cause them having these things at 30 that cause you to not have these things at 30. If we look at what the cause and effect relationship is behind that, they may have been working in a very lucrative career for 12 years since they were 18 years old, and it took them 10 years to even amass any amount of money. And that's where, let's say you're comparing the amount of money you have to the amount of money they have. They bought a house, right? And let's pretend that somehow they're posting on social media about how they bought it in cash, right? And this is an influencer, just to give you an example. So you're comparing the fact that they're 30, you're 30, and they're further ahead than you financially. But what's the context? How did they get there and how did you not get there? Are you on track to, given the fact that maybe 8 of those 12 years of your life were quote unquote wasted, or not wasted, but spent in something that would not simply not produce those types of results, well, it's pretty easy to understand why that might not happen. But I also say this to say ambitious people follow high performers in general, right? We always look up, we want to do better, we want to grow, and so we also want to model ourselves based on what other people are doing. But part of the issue with that, especially with social media, is that your reference group becomes unrealistic. Who you compare yourself to is like the top 0.07% of people, right? Or the top 0.3%. And you might be in the top 2%, right? Which is great. But there's still levels to the game. And when you're comparing your, behind the scenes, the raw reality of your entire life to somebody else's, again, highlight reel, that's where this gap feels exacerbated and you feel further behind. So again, the more ambitious you are, oftentimes the higher level of people you compare yourself to. But there's an even deeper reason behind why this happens, and what that is your awareness of your own potential. Ambitious people judge themselves against where they could be or where they feel like they should be by now. Most people just kind of simply compare themselves to others. And again, I just talked about how ambitious people do that as well. But ambitious people compare themselves to their own potential. And it can become a very painful experience to know that this person over there may not be as smart as me or as hardworking as me, yet they've achieved some kind of result that I want to achieve and I haven't achieved that. And that makes you feel behind. It can make you question things in a lot of cases. The thing here is that potential is infinite. You can keep, moving goalposts all the way up. There are people who build trillion-dollar companies in this world, right? So the scoreboard never finishes, and they're still trying to beat each other and build the next 3, 4, $5 trillion company, whatever the number is. So this is what creates this permanent or perpetual pressure and this ongoing perpetual feeling of just feeling behind in life. So when you have these moving goalposts, when you're comparing yourselves to other people's situations, again, with social media inflating this gap for you, right? You set bigger goals, you feel further away from your bigger goals, and then you compare yourselves to other people, the very, very select few number of people who have actually achieved those goals, and then you look at, the fact that you believe you can achieve that and so much more. It all just amplifies this feeling and perpetuates the feeling, so it continues bugging you. And so when you combine those three things, the bar really just moves faster than your sense of progress, so you always feel behind. And so many ambitious people can be objectively doing really well, but still just feel like they're behind, and this is a big part of why. And ironically, the very trait that pushes ambitious people forward in life is oftentimes the exact same trait that makes them feel like they're never quite where they should be at any given point in time. So feeling behind doesn't always mean you're doing poorly. Sometimes feeling behind can just simply mean you're ambitious. Now, if you're somebody who thinks very deeply about your life, your career, the things you're ambitious about, wanting to optimize all different parts of your life and just do the best you possibly can. I'm very focused on all these things, and I look at it very much through a psychological lens. How can I optimize my mind to help me reach my goals as quickly as possible, as painlessly as possible, this kind of thing. If that's something that resonates with you, consider subscribing. Otherwise, hope you enjoyed.